what is the Poor Man of Nippur? Where does it come from? Where did we get the story? Did we make it up? And the answer is no. We have it from clay tablets in the Babylonian language and the cuneiform script. There's one principal tablet which was excavated in Turkey, and then there's a few fragments of tablets which come from other sites in ancient Iraq.
And the Poor Man of Nippur is an oral tradition. It's a story that ordinary people probably would have told each other. And somehow this is wound up in the great scholarly libraries.
Babylonian literature often tends to be quite mysterious. There's a lot of gods and the names are unfamiliar. So if you simply sit down and read it, you might be slightly disoriented. The Poor Man of Nippur is a big exception.
There's quite a lot of cases in this text where the language is rather highfalutin, good quality Babylonian, so to speak, with good forms and good vocabulary, and it's a literary piece of work.
So from the point of view of Babylonian literary culture, it's actually linguistically a high-status artefact, a highly elaborate work, and so you can see why Ashurbanipal wanted to include it in his library on those grounds alone.
I definitely think the story can be interpreted as either comical or serious. I prefer the comical interpretation myself, this idea of something rather slapsticky when he comes in and he's really over theatrical, especially with the doctor scene, with the "my cures only work in the dark."
And in stories which are humorous like this one, when you hear something again and again, you notice the difference in the context each time. There's something quite funny about the mayor being beaten up 3 times, and every time it happens, you're recognising something coming around again.
But again, it could be played equally serious, which might tie in more with the idea of an escapist, fantastical, corrupt official revenge story, where it just feels more satisfying if it's played seriously. But I think comical is perhaps the right way to go, especially in terms of filming. It's much easier to do a slapstick than it is to do something serious.
Sometimes when one reads things, the idea crosses your mind that this might be humorous, or ironic, or a bit of both. But I never got this out of that story, The Poor Man of Nippur. It never struck me that way. I think there probably are quite a lot of nuances crammed into that text, under the surface, and by and large irretrievable.
I think it is a comical story, but also that it makes a serious point about social roles.
I think in this story, the person we're most supposed to sympathise with is Gimel Ninurta, the main character, because he is sort of the classic underdog, and he does have a really, really well-defined character arc. He undergoes a lot of struggles, and this naturally makes us root for him.
When you try to pin down exactly what's happening, you find that there's a lot of room for interpretations. How's our attitude to Gimel Ninurta supposed to evolve? At the beginning, clearly we feel sorry for him, we sympathise, but as he gets more and more evil, and as the poor mayor gets more and more bruised, then is it the case that our sympathies start to shift? Are we questioning our sympathies? Is the poem supposed to lead us to question things? Are we supposed to sympathise with the mayor by the end?
He starts off very much in a kind of elevated position, treading down on the Poor Man of Nippur, at which point it's meant to be quite a sort of caricaturish and very unsympathetic character. But then it's interesting to question as we go forward and as the sort of scale of the response of the poor man gets worse and worse and worse and the mayor keeps getting beaten up, whether towards the end we are meant to have sympathy for this or originally quite dastardly character.
This story is an example of reciprocity. Reciprocity is a basis of Mesopotamian life. So I don't think we should sympathize with the mayor at all. The king is a shining example of how to behave, but this mayor is a shining example of how we should not behave in Mesopotamian society.
Locating the story in Nippur might have had some kind of specific reference to a reader. As it were, you're in the bar and someone says, "Oh, you know the story about the Poor Man of Nippur," and everybody would know it was going to be such and such a kind of story.
I think there is something special about it being set in Nippur, because Nippur was famous for being the cult centre of the gods Ninurta and Enlil. And Ninurta is famous in Babylonian mythology for being the one who avenges slights of authority. There's another poem called Anzu, where a demon eagle with a lion's head steals the tablet of destinies from the chief god Enlil and thus takes away his authority. And who's the one that gets it back? It's Ninurta. So I think it's very interesting that in this story we have a man called Gimil Ninurta who is also avenging slights to authority and challenging power in this way. I think that's definitely significant.
It's interesting that the only school tablet that's so far come to light with this on is indeed from Nippur, because we have many thousands of school tablets from the first millennium from the cities of Babylonia, Sippar, Warka and Babylon, and no other specimen, as far as I know, has come to light with part of this story. And this only has a few lines of it, so it was at least certain that it was on the curriculum at Nippur, and that seems to me to fit with the likelihood that that's where the story originated.
It's a very abrupt ending, and I've often wondered actually what that's about. And after the mayor is beaten up for the third time, the poor man goes off into the countryside and the mayor crawls back to the city. I think that must say something interesting about city versus countryside. But what it is a bit of a mystery.
I went to a department outreach event that was it was partially at the British Museum, and it was like an Egypt and Mesopotamia conference, and I just found it absolutely fascinating.
Sure.